The Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro confirms his administration is in contact with the United States. The International Commission Against Impunity in Guatemala presents its final work. And the UN warns that clashes between factions in the Saudi-led coalition risk worsening the humanitarian situation in Yemen. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I am Doris Polo. The president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, has confirmed that his administration is in contact with the U.S. government. He made the announcement after U.S. media reported the establishment of back channels between both nations on Monday.
For many months, we have been in touch with the U.S. as we search for dialogue in Venezuela. I have also looked for ways that President Donald Trump can know the truth about Venezuela, and with respect that he listens to the truth of the Bolivarian revolution of the 21st century, and not to believe the information that his officials and collaborators give him, a fake Venezuela. And over that basis that they make threats, attacks, sanctions. I confirm that for months, there has been communication between senior officials from the Trump administration and the Bolivarian government that I preside over. This communication took place under my express authorization.
Our correspondent in Caracas, Luis Tavera, has the latest.
The government of President Nicolas Maduro has confirmed that Venezuela is actively engaged in direct communications with the U.S. government, in the hopes of maintaining peace and of resolving any differences there could be between both countries. President Maduro issued the assurance in response to rumors spread by the Venezuelan opposition, who were hoping to incite violence, while continuing to openly call for military intervention in the Bolivarian Republic. During his speech on Monday, the president also spoke about the ongoing attacks by the White House on the Venezuelan people and on Venezuela's economic development. To summarize, President Maduro cited the unilateral economic sanctions imposed by the U.S., the seizure of Venezuela's government's assets abroad, and the freezing of Venezuela's funds in foreign banks as reasons for the recent slowdown in social programs. Many Venezuelans echo the president's sentiments as they continue to collect signatures in the No More Trump campaign. The goal of this anti-Trump drive is to gather 13 million signatures to back a manifesto planned to present in September to the 74th session of the General Assembly of the United Nations.
And the Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez has met with the Russian Foreign Minister during an official visit to Moscow. Sergei Lavrov said Russia will continue to support Venezuela in the face of the U.S. blockade, while the Venezuelan Vice President spoke of the increasing cooperation between both nations.
We have always been and will always be true to these principles of international law. And we will always be united with you. We will stand for people's rights to choose the path of their development and strictly oppose any unlawful, illegal methods of blackmail and pressure.
The exchange between Russia and Venezuela is happening more often and in larger volumes. I had the opportunity to assess this with the chairman of the High-Level Commission, Yuri Borisov, how our affairs are progressing within the framework of this commission, and I see that we have made serious progress in all areas.
The Foreign Relations Committee in the Brazilian Chamber of Deputies has approved a deal to cede use of the Alcantara Launch Center to the United States. The deal has come under criticism for relinquishing Brazilian sovereignty, and the Socialist and Liberty Party denounced the negative effect it will have on the Quilombo Afro-Brazilian communities in the area. It must still be passed by the Science and Technology and the Constitution and Justice Committees before going to a vote in the full chamber. The agreement to cede the launch center was reached in March this year during President Bolsonaro's visit to the United States. Human rights lawyers in France have warned that the policies of the Brazilian president, Jair Bolsonaro, in the Amazon region could amount to crimes against humanity. This comes as the Brazilian Space Institute reported that nearly 73,000 wildfires have been recorded in Brazil this year, more than half of them in Amazonia. That's an increase of 80% compared with last year. Brian Meyer reports from Sao Paulo.
I'm standing on the north side of Sao Paulo, where the entire city is engulfed in smog, as it has been since Monday, in a weather phenomenon that's related to smoke coming up from the Amazon rainforest, where thousands of fires are currently raging. Now, every year in the dry season in the Amazon region, small farmers and ranchers practice slash and burn agriculture techniques. They burn the scrub on their land, and it creates nutrients in the soil. It's not good for the environment, but it's hard to convince them to stop doing it. But what's happening this year is different. President Jair Bolsonaro is giving out signals to the big loggers and agribusiness companies that they can invade natural parks and indigenous reservations and chop down trees and burn whatever they want. And so there's huge fires out of control, animals are dying, and the risk is that if he continues acting this way, there could be a phenomenon called dieback, in which the entire forest could burn down uncontrollably if it reaches a certain point of deforestation. And some biologists are predicting this could happen by 2030. Now, if Bolsonaro stays in power acting this way, the odds are that this is really going to happen. And since the Amazon provides the world with 20% of its oxygen, it would be a catastrophe.
That was Brand Meir with that report. And now for the last in our series, Minas Gerais, mining conflicts in Brazil. In this report, we look at some of the concrete actions being taken by those who suffered from the collapse of the mining dams owned by Vale Mining. But first, we hear from the company itself.
Vale Mining says that among other benefits, more than 100,000 victims receive an emergency payment every month in Brumadinho, where its dam collapsed in January. In Barão de Cocais, where the dam is at risk, it says the company is monitoring the site and carrying out remedial works to minimize any damage. And in Mariana, the company's Renewal Foundation claims it is making progress with the payment of damages to those affected by the disaster in 2015. But the victims themselves are pressing on with their battle in the courts and in the streets. On the 25th of every month, relatives of those who died in Brumadinho hold a protest.
They think profits are more important than human lives, but they aren't.
In Mariana, 4 years after the dam collapsed, small-scale miners and fishermen are still struggling to be officially recognized as victims. In June, they occupied the offices of the Renewal Foundation, set up by the dam owners to deal with damage caused.
We can certainly struggle, and we'll have to struggle to force them to pay us what we are entitled to.
In some towns like Barra Longa, which was covered by mud in 2015, the victims have won the right to independent technical advice to help them rebuild their lives.
This technical advice is totally independent of the Renewal Foundation and the mining companies, so it has the complete trust of those affected.
The movement of those affected by dams, or MAB, and the Movement for People's Control of Mining, MAM, are two of the organizations supporting the communities here in Minas Gerais. They're helping to coordinate the resistance.
The best way of being effective and defending our rights is through this kind of coordination, both nationally and internationally.
It is through struggle, by mobilizing the people, that we can develop a platform of demands and win concrete benefits for the region.
The resistance of the victims of Vale's dam disasters is taking firm steps on its path to win justice. But they also want to make sure that no other community in the world should ever have to live through a similar drama.
After the break, we look at the Bolivian President Evo Morales' efforts to control fires in the country's Amazon region. Stay with us.
We are present at every event where our nations are staring. We believe in a new global vision, united in every broadcasting. We keep expanding our horizons and working on a closer and better communication. Now, in Grenada, Telesur, the news source from South America and the Caribbean.
Social organizations are set to demonstrate against the Guatemalan President Jimmy Morales' refusal to renew the mandate of the International Commission Against Impunity in Guatemala. Our correspondent in Guatemala City has more.
Here in the Guatemalan capital, the United Nations International Commission Against Impunity in Guatemala has begun to come to an end with a report on its final work. Its findings during the work conducted over the past 12 years were reported on Tuesday and finished on Wednesday. The report says that 60 criminal enterprises have been dismantled and that 380 people have been brought to justice, with more than 600 going before the courts. Social organizations have announced a demonstration at the Constitutional Court, demanding that the court continues in the country, and that by September 3rd, the UN's Commission's mandate is extended after President Jimmy Morales said that he won't be renewing it. Their argument is that the president has a conflict of interest and cannot make the decision because the Commission wanted to investigate him and made 2 requests over illicit financing of his campaign in 2015. So social organizations say there is a conflict of interests and Jimmy Morales fears an investigation, and that is why he won't renew the Commission.
The Association for the Development of El Salvador and the Guatemalan Madre Silva Collective are inspecting the levels of contamination in Lake Guija, which shares the border between both countries. They're also denouncing the negative effects of mining activities, which they blame for water pollution.
Lake Guija is a Ramsar site and is designated to be of international importance under the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands. Women living on the outskirts of the lake, which borders between Guatemala and El Salvador, are gathering microorganisms which live in the water to analyze its quality. This, as the water provides a source of income to the people.
We have monitored the lake because we are the ones who will be affected if the lake becomes contaminated. It means we will not have anything to live on. We fish here. If there are no fish, we won't have money to feed and raise our children.
Under the supervision of Cede, a biologist at the University of El Salvador, these women have learned how to use technological tools to monitor the temperature, salinity, and acidity of the water. They have also learned about the migration of small species that live in the lake.
Insects, according to their population and species, can determine if the water in the lake is excellent, bad, or very bad. The humble women that are monitoring the situation, in some cases, cannot read or write. But they have learned through these techniques, which we have broken down in simple terms for them to understand.
Environmentalists in Guatemala from the Madre Selva Collective are denouncing attempts by officials to grant permits to mining companies, such as in the Cerro Blanco mine on the border with El Salvador.
There's a cement company that is throwing sediments and metals into the river basin. Now we are trying to work as a collective to determine the causes of the contamination. And the main one in this case is Cerro Blanco, which is extracting thermal water to supposedly remove its arsenic. But due to the large volume, it falls into the basin of the Ostua River, which drains into this lake.
Their research has not unearthed alarming levels of arsenic in the lake, but environmentalists say they will continue to monitor Lake Guija, where the Lempa River begins, the largest river which supplies water to the Salvadoran territory.
Now, as wildfires have destroyed more than 500,000 hectares in the Amazon region of Bolivia in the last 2 weeks, President Evo Morales announced that more equipment will assist with putting out the blaze. Our correspondent Freddy Morales has the details from La Paz.
The emergency cabinet includes 5 ministers, and they, along with the vice president, Alvaro Garcia Linera, travelled at midday to Rebore, on the border with Brazil. That's where an operations centre has been set up to try to bring under control the wildfires that have been burning for more than 2 weeks now across the country, but mainly in that tropical region of the Santa Cruz department. The ministries that are part of this environmental emergency cabinet are the President's Office, the Cabinet Office, the Environment Ministry, the Rural Development Ministry, and the Ministry of Health. At the same time, the Minister of Finance has been given the go-ahead to contract a giant plane that is specially designed to fight forest fires from the air. Let's listen to that announcement by President Evo Morales.
After evaluating all the work done, I've authorized the Minister of Economy to hire a Boeing 747 supertanker plane, so it can help us put out the several fires that are affecting the eastern areas of Bolivia.
We are told that this plane has a capacity to carry 70,000 litres of water on each flight. We should remember that there are already 4 helicopters working in the region, pouring water onto the areas that are on fire. There is also a helicopter on standby to evacuate people at risk, but that hasn't been necessary so far. Civil pilots from Santa Cruz have made themselves available, along with their light aircraft, to help in any way needed to fight the fires from the air. President Morales has made clear that although many of the fires have been extinguished, the strength and direction of the wind means that the flames often break out again. In the frontier area of Robore, where the fires are most intense, classes have been suspended indefinitely in the schools since yesterday, until the emergency is over. The Ministry of Health has begun distributing medicines for respiratory problems caused by the poor air quality, and also for eye problems. A lot of people in the area are suffering from these sorts of problems, and the authorities are giving them eye drops. The official figures are reporting more than 500,000 hectares have been burned to the ground in the last 2 weeks.
That was Freddy Morales with that report from La Paz, Bolivia. In other news, Haitian legislators are set to resume debate on a motion to impeach President Jovenel Moïse later on Wednesday. At least 21 deputies had filed the motion accusing Moïse of high treason, claiming that he had violated the Constitution and was leading the country to a social crisis. Now, when the matter came up for debate last week, Monday, only a few deputies were present at the start, forcing an adjournment. Meanwhile, the opposition is trying to stop Haiti's 4th attempt to ratify a new government and prime minister. The opposition has asked for the postponement of all activities scheduled for this Friday related to the presentation of Prime Minister-designate Fritz William Michel and his cabinet to the chamber. The request was made in a letter submitted to the chamber president, signed by 8 of 21 opposition deputies. The opposition informs of a court appeal concerning the order of tax discharge granted to Michel by the Superior Court of Accounts. The British Virgin Islands is at odds with the United Kingdom over loan funding designed to help the islands rebuild after 2 hurricanes caused widespread destruction in 2017. The UK government is demanding that to provide its loan guarantee, the Virgin Islands must hand over almost full control of the management of its finances to a recovery agency set up at the request of London. BVI Premier Andrew Fahey said the British Overseas Territory is not about to mortgage its birthright in order to access this funding. Fahey added that the limited self-government that the BVI currently enjoys is the fruit of the labor and struggles of forefathers who forged society today after slave masters and European capitalists abandoned the islands.
I am pleased to announce that
Staying in the Caribbean, 3 nationals are going to showcase their climate change solutions at the UN Youth Climate Summit on September 21st. They will also engage directly with decision makers on the defining issue. The climate champions are Khadija Usher of Belize, Danalyn Swaby of Jamaica, and Marika Dookie of Trinidad and Tobago. They were chosen from among applicants from around the world and will join other green ticket winners for the first ever Youth Climate Summit. Still to come, Kashmiri residents are keeping their children out of school as security escalates. Don't go away.
Who's moving to Chesney? What interests motivate the actors behind each event?
Se despliega el tablero.
Uncritical Moves investigates every event from Monday to Friday. Only on Telesur.
Welcome back. The UN Special Envoy for Yemen, Martin Griffiths, has warned that escalating clashes between government forces and southern separatist forces will worsen the country's humanitarian situation. The two sides, which are both part of the Saudi-led coalition against the Houthi movement, have in recent days fought fierce battles for control of the southern city of Aden. The separatists are demanding an independent state in the country's south. On Tuesday, the separatists drove government troops out of two military camps.
The fragmentation of Yemen is becoming a stronger and more pressing threat. And this, of course, makes our efforts in the Yemeni peace process more urgent than ever. And there is no time to lose. The stakes are becoming too high for the future of Yemen, the Yemeni people, and indeed the wider region.
Meanwhile, the World Food Programme has resumed the distribution of food in Yemen's capital, Sana'a, after suspending the program 2 months ago. The WFP suspended the distribution of food on June 20th due to allegations that the food was being diverted from the intended beneficiaries. However, the UN agency spokesperson said they had reached an agreement with the Houthi authorities to ensure that the food reaches the vulnerable people, such as children, pregnant women, and nursing mothers.
WFP has just resumed food distributions in Sana'a city. We were forced to suspend distributions for 850,000 people for 2 months, so that was in June and in July. And we're very pleased that we've managed to reach an understanding with the authorities.
Kashmir residents continue to be gripped by fear as insecurity escalates, keeping students away from schools. Most parents have kept their children at home due to fear of violence. Schools in Kashmir have been ordered to reopen in the midst of a curfew imposed by the Indian government. Armed security forces are still patrolling the streets, and most people are still confined in their homes with limited communication as mobile and internet connections are still blocked.
Once the environment is conducive, then we'll be able to send our children to school. Because right now we don't feel safety and security. That's the point.
5 European Union states have agreed to take in migrants who were stranded for weeks on the open arms rescue ship in the Mediterranean. On Tuesday night, the 100 migrants disembarked on the Italian island of Lampedusa after a judge ordered that the ship be seized. The far-right Italian Interior Minister Matteo Salvini had earlier refused to allow the ship to dock, saying the country had borne too much responsibility for the handling of African migration to Europe. An EU spokeswoman in Brussels said Spain, France, Germany, Luxembourg and Portugal have agreed to take them in. Earlier, we were joined by Paolo Nasso, coordinator of Mediterranean Hope. He said, quite frankly, there's a contradiction between political decisions and laws to protect human rights.
If we are going to the election, and this is not clear, this will be the issue. And I think that we have two major options. One is the option of closing the border, but letting the people arriving illegally. What we probably don't know and don't underline enough is the fact that there are some people who have been rescued by the NGOs, but many other boats arrive independently, alone, so to say, with the little boats to our coast. Number two, the number of those who had been sent back to Italy from Germany and other European countries, the number of those who has been repatriated in Italy is higher of those who arrived by boats from the Mediterranean. It means that our policy is a little bit schizophrenic. We say that we don't have our harbor open, but in reality, a lot of people arrive.
Meanwhile, Nasso said a common agenda should be formed in Europe to address the migration issue. He also criticized fake news, which he says affects the way people see immigration.
Unfortunately, when people speak about migrations, very, very often they have false data information. Fake news are destroying a rational approach to the issue of immigration, and a kind of emotionalism, political emotionalism is the real arrow indicating the strategy for many, many people. This is wrong. We are facing a very serious problem. We don't have easy solution, but for sure, to be blind and just to forget the people dying is not the solution. At least it cannot be the solution for Europe.
That brings us to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thank you for watching.
From here to beyond the South. From here to the Caribbean or further north. Where can I see news connecting the whole South? From Washington. From Mexico. From Caracas. From Quito. From Havana. You can always see the news from a new vision, connecting the global South. Only on Telesur.
The Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali examines the mass media influence promoted by imperialism. Get access to the analysis of the socio-economic and political life of the whole South America on our screen and platform in English. A critical place committed to the truth to determine the major events that transformed the world today. On Monday, only on Telesur.
Discover the cultural diversity that defines a continent. The place where art and tradition are part of the same nucleus. Artistic expressions, values, passion, and more. Real life. Fridays, only on Telesur.
You're watching Telesur English. I am Doris Polo. These are the headlines at this hour. The Brazilian Amazon is burning at a record level as fires sweep across the region. Over 50% of the nearly 73,000 fires in Brazil since January this year have occurred in the Amazon. That's an 80% increase on the same period in 2018. The neoliberal policies of right-wing